Welcome to the Lentil Intervention Podcast, talking all things movement, whole food nutrition and environmental wellness with your hosts, Ben and Emma.
Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new year, a brand new season, Season 2, Episode 1. My name is Ben Adelberg and welcome Emma Strutt. Hello Emma.
G'day Ben, how are you going?
Good, thank you. Had a good break?
I did, yes. Happy New Year. Hope you're going well.
Very good and very, very excited because we are back, as I've said, and we've already got a fantastic lineup of guests ready to roll out. So plenty to talk about. We also just want to say firstly, thank you to everyone that's been subscribing to the newsletter. There's been a lot of people signing up, so that's awesome. And through the year, we'll every now and again release a newsletter with some little bits of information and links back to some valuable tools and other stuff on our website and other places. One thing I also want to remind you, just a few weeks to go till myself, I undertake the Tarawera Ultra Marathon, 100 miles, and as I've mentioned before, I am fundraising for the Native Forest Restoration Trust. So please head over to our website. There's a give a little page, donate a little bit. Thank you to those that have already done so. And Emma, let's kick off with our first guest, and it'll tie nicely with the fundraising too.
Absolutely. We are kicking this year off with a bang, with a phenomenal guest, an amazing human with a passion for creating content that makes a real difference in people's lives. So we are lucky to have Michal Siewierski with us today. Michal is an Emmy-nominated, award-winning filmmaker, TV producer, and marketing expert. He has directed and produced the well-known health documentaries Food Choice and Diet Fiction, and has recently launched another stellar documentary into the world, one of his most important works yet, I could argue, the documentary Takeout, which investigates the connection between Amazon deforestation and the global meat industry. So we are very much in for a treat today. Michal, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey guys, hey Ben, hey Emma, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
An absolute privilege, Michal, and I know it's taken us a little while. You're literally on the other side of the world, so getting our time zones, and you're on a different day. You're still a day behind us. So how's it going in the US at the moment?
Well, it's a little crazy right now. I'm sure you guys have been following the news, so lots of things going on. We're just kind of following and hoping for the best right now. But yeah, it's kind of crazy times we live in, right?
It is, and you're right. We certainly have been getting some snippets coming out of the US as well. So let's kick off. As Emma's mentioned, an amazing CV of achievements. The work you do is absolutely phenomenal, and a lot of it also important in terms of the messages that you try and get out there. But let's start right from the beginning. Let's learn a little bit about yourself. You're born in Poland, you've lived in Brazil, you're in the US. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your lifestyle, and your own personal journey to a whole food, plant-based way of living.
Sure. Yeah. So like you said, I was born in Poland and kind of moved around a lot in my childhood. My parents both were they are university professors. So we're kind of at first ran away from Poland because of the communist regime there. My father was opposed to it, and he was a professor at the university, so he was being persecuted a little bit by the regime. So we had to kind of flee the country and went to Portugal. From Portugal, went to the UK. From the UK, went to Brazil. And that's where we kind of landed, and my parents still live there. I lived in Brazil for 18 years, then moved to the US at the age of 23, 24, and been here for about 18 years now in the US. And it's great. I love this country. This is home now for me, and very grateful. But as far as my health journey, and my journey towards a plant-based lifestyle, I was a little bit of a workaholic, and I was not really taking good care of myself, just not eating well, not exercising, starting like around my mid-30s. So for 10 years, I really neglected my health and my lifestyle. Was just really focused on my work, with producing TV commercials, with the ad agencies and all that. So that took a toll on my health. I found myself, in my around my early to mid 30s, with started having some issues with my health. Started having high blood pressure, high cholesterol, high sugar, and was about 60 pounds overweight. And all the doctors could offer me basically was medication, and I was not a big fan of taking medication. So I started, trying different diets, but usually it was the typical yo-yo diet, the Atkins or, some variation of, the low carb, high protein diets that were very popular back then. They still kind of are, maybe a little bit less today. But that, I would lose some weight, then gain it right back. And I did that for a couple of years. It was very frustrating. And during that period of time, my health kept going down. It was getting worse, and I was at a point where I was basically a pre-type 2 diabetic, and blood pressure was up, and that was like in my early to mid 30s. And I really needed to start taking medication according to my doctor. And I was lucky to stumble upon information about a plant-based diet. I read the China study, like many people that are introduced to veganism through the China study. I read the book, then I watched a few documentaries like Forks Over Knives, and really went down the plant-based rabbit hole, and just really fell in love with the lifestyle. And long story short, within 12 months of transitioning into the plant-based lifestyle, I did not transition immediately. It took me a few months. But basically 12 months after starting the transition to plant-based, then, I lost 60 pounds, and all my blood work came back to normal. So I was sold on the idea, and I really enjoyed it. I liked the food. It was delicious. It was fun. And I really aligned with the ethics and values of veganism and a plant-based diet, and became really interested in the aspects of veganism and a plant-based diet related to animals and related to the environment. And at that time, I was also looking for a little bit of a change in my career, because I had been working in the TV industry with TV commercials for over 10 years at that time, 10 to 12 years, and I was a little tired because my clients basically not always aligned with my ethics and values. I did work for fast food chains and products and services and people that didn't really align with what I believed in. And I started having some moral dilemmas, and I kind of wanted to see if I could use my skills, my video and my producer skills, to create something more meaningful, something that I would be proud of, And that's when I decided to, look into producing a documentary. And at first, it was something very new for me, even though I had the video production experience. Film is very different, so I had a steep learning curve. But it just happened that it aligned with the same time when I was, transitioning to a plant-based diet. So I was going down the information rabbit hole of plant-based and reading all the books and all that. And that was a topic that was really interesting to me. And I decided to start making a documentary about that topic, and to kind of fill a gap that I believe there was a gap at the time. Now there's, plenty of documentaries about that. But back then, you basically had Forks Over Knives. You had, like Food Matters and Hungry for Change, which were not necessarily, they're more, towards plant-based, but were not entirely plant-based. But I wanted to fill a gap with my documentary, with Food Choices, basically connecting the aspects of human health, of environment, and animal welfare all into one documentary, and showing how all these things are interconnected. And that's how the idea of creating Food Choices started. And it was a little bit of a long journey. It took me actually 3 years to make the film because I was still working full time in advertising, and my daughter was born kind of in the middle of the process, so I took a little break there. But finished the film, and was fortunate to get good distribution, and the film ended up on Netflix. It was on Netflix for 2 years, and now it's still available on Amazon Prime and dozens of other digital platforms all around the world. And from there, I decided to continue the journey. I, was able to be successful with Food Choices also from a financial point of view, so that allowed me to continue this filmmaking journey, and proceeded to make more films. And I was lucky to connect with individuals that supported my films, and my executive producer that was an amazing help into making my other two films possible. And he's actually from New Zealand. I don't know if you guys heard about him, Peter Eastwood, an amazing philanthropist, and supports many different causes. And he helped us make the two consecutive films that we created. And that's the journey that I'm in right now. Just creating films that create positive change in the world and that help people, animals, and the environment.
It's amazing. And just going back to the first documentary, Food Choice, that was released in, 2016? Is that more
Correct.
or less? Yeah. So that to me is really, I rewatched it just the other day. That was really groundbreaking at the time because, like you say, there was a bit of a void at the time. Documentaries talking about, obesity and what you put in, is it sugar, is it fat? But it didn't deep dive. And your documentary especially, it's not that long ago, but 5 years ago, talking about the impact on the environment. No one was really doing that. So it was certainly a big deal, that film. And it's a shame that it's not still sticking around on the likes of Netflix and readily available for a lot of people. But to our listeners, if you haven't seen that documentary, it's a fantastic one to watch, especially someone that is not following a vegan diet for whatever reason. It touches on all those elements, and it's certainly highly recommended. And then obviously your second documentary, Diet Fiction. That was your second documentary, and released 2019, I believe.
Correct. Yeah. So my second film, Diet Fiction. The goal with that film was kind of to focus a little bit more on obesity and issues related to weight and weight loss, because on Food Choices we tackled a lot of topics, but there was a limit of things that we could really dive deep into. And I'm someone that struggled with obesity for a long time, so that was also a topic that I was very passionate about. So I wanted to share some of the key concepts that I learned during my journey of weight loss that we're not necessarily able to cover all of them in Food Choices. So that was the focus of Diet Fiction. And just trying to pass that information on to people, to educate people, because one issue that we have is, veganism is becoming more and more popular, but veganism doesn't always equate to good health. So you can be a very healthy vegan, or you can have a very unhealthy vegan lifestyle by, eating a lot of the new and delicious processed vegan foods that are out there, which, I indulge in them every now and then. They're really tasty, but I try to, see them more as treats rather than, a daily consumption thing. So we wanted to make that distinction, between a whole food plant-based diet and a vegan diet, which a vegan diet is phenomenal from the point of view of animal rights and environment. But from the human health issue, it could be either, very unhealthy, normal, or very healthy, depends kind of how you approach it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something we say all the time on the podcast. Actually, there's a huge difference in health outcomes between whole food plant-based and, the delicious vegan junk food. And I just want to say, as a dietitian, I really, really appreciated your diet fiction film because there's a lot of misinformation out there when it comes to weight loss. So weight loss seems pretty simple on the surface, but it can be really complex. Even within the plant-based world, there seems to be a lot of misinformation floating around. So thank you so much for taking a deep dive into that topic. I think it's well worth the watch if anyone hasn't seen it yet.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm glad you liked it.
Now, we're here for your third documentary, which has been released on Amazon Prime and I think iTunes, but in the US only. So we are still waiting for a global release, which we're really hoping doesn't play out to be like the Game Changers, where so much anticipation you have to wait 3 years. But the trailer, we've put that on our page already. There's information out there already, so already on the surface from the little we've seen, it's something we definitely wanted to talk about, and we're going to go into a little bit deeper. But let's start off. Takeout. What inspired you to do this documentary?
Yeah, so Takeout, the story with Takeout relates to my background of growing up in Brazil as a child and as a teenager and young adult. And, I have a background, actually. I went to university in Brazil to study forestry and ecology. So that was my major in Brazil. So for 4 years, I studied that in Brazil, and I did a 2-year internship at the fire ecology department at the University of Brasilia, under the guidance of Professor Eloisa Miranda, who's a very prominent professor when it comes to fire ecology around the world. And we were studying the effects of fire on different ecosystems. They had this big farm where they did controlled fire regimes and basically analyzing what happens to the fauna, to the flora, to the soil, and how different fire regimes, basically how often you burn the forest, what happens with it, and how quickly the forest can recover and things like that. So I have this background, and I kind of, it was many years ago that I went to university, but I still remember some of those key concepts and how, fire can be destructive to a forest ecosystem. And, when we started hearing more about the terrible forest fires in Brazil a couple of years ago, that kind of motivated me to educate people a little bit more about the cause of these fires and why these fires are happening, which, it's almost directly tied to, in a way, to our food choices, because one of the main responsible factors for those fires is the cattle industry and their expansion and destruction of the Amazon forest. So I met with my executive producer and our producer also in Chicago. It was actually the day after the premiere of Diet Fiction, and we're sitting at this nice vegan restaurant and just kind of chatting. And they asked me, so like, what's your new idea? What's your new projects? And I said, what, I have this idea in the back of my mind, and I kind of described to them what I just described to you. And my executive producer, he loved the idea. Peter, he just said, what, I'm in. Let's make this happen. And I was like, really? He's like, yeah, let's do it. So fast forward a few months, we started putting a plan together, and I flew to Brazil 3 times over a period of 1 year, and did a bunch of interviews in Brazil and in America as well, and started putting it together. And the result is Takeout. That's the film, which we hope to launch internationally within the next few months. We're having some delays with distribution that we're tackling now, and hopefully within the next, I would say, 2 to 4 months, we should be able to start our international distribution.
We cannot wait. Now, this documentary features the likes of much revered and much liked experts such as Dr. Neil Barnard, Dr. Michael Clapper. But my question is, how do you get someone like Moby involved?
Yeah, so Moby took a little bit of time. He is a very well-known person, and as you know, with famous people, celebrities, there's a few gatekeepers that you have to go through. So fortunately, I had a couple of friends that knew him personally, and after asking a lot of favors and waiting for a long time, I was able to get in touch with him. And it took a while. It took several months, but we were finally able to schedule an interview. And he was very, very generous with his time, and it was just a phenomenal interview. He's a great human being, and also he offered to become more involved with the film on an executive producer capacity. He donated one of his songs called Mere Anarchy to use in our trailer, towards the end of our trailer, and also towards the end of our film. So we have that song, which normally would have cost us a lot of money to get the rights for it, but he graciously donated it for us. And the topic of plant-based diet and animal rights is something that he's very passionate about. So he liked the idea of our project, and he was very supportive.
He certainly were very vocal. So to have someone like him on board and with his profile, with his exposures, is a phenomenal gain. So, yeah, well done on that, and certainly adds that extra little level of value as well. So let's get straight into it. Let's first understand big picture here. Let's first understand what the Amazon rainforest it's all about, and why do we need to care about what's happening to the Amazon? Because in an episode last year, one of the episodes we refer back to a lot, we interviewed an environmental scientist that spoke about the deforestation happening in Queensland, Australia. And, we said it's great that we're concerned about the Amazon, Southeast Asia, Central Africa, etc. But, we need to be aware of what's happening close to home. And we spoke about, in Queensland alone, which is 3/4 of Australia's tree clearing, is about 400,000 hectares per annum that takes place. And that's a lot. That's quite horrific. But let's go back to the Amazon. So the Amazon is quite significant. What happens to the Amazon has an impact on the rest of the world. So let's first start there. Let's understand why the Amazon rainforest is so important to us.
Yeah, so the Amazon contains such major biodiversity, and we're only scratching the surface as far as identifying, plant species and animal species as far as insects goes in that region. And, many cures for many diseases have the compounds of medication that was created later on came from the Amazon. So it's a very rich ecosystem that also plays a role, a role as far as the weather of the world. It plays a big role, and with rain cycles and with climate change and several other aspects that affect all of us. So that's why it's really important that we take care of that environment, and it's important on so many levels. I mean, there's several, indigenous populations that still live in those areas, that lived there for thousands of years, and now they're being threatened, and they're basically at the risk of becoming extinct. And there's all the animal species, all the biodiversity, all the water that comes from the Amazon, and so it has profound effects not only on a local level in Brazil, but also on a global level when it comes to climate change and several other factors.
Yeah, I've heard them described often as the Earth's lungs, and I think that's pretty true. Now, a lot of people saw those just really disturbing images of the Amazon burning a couple of years ago that went around the world and made worldwide news. But I think a lot of people aren't aware that, tropical rainforests, they have high humidity. They don't naturally burn like that. So what's causing this and why?
Yeah, so basically what happens is, and that's a common question, people ask, well, but the rainforest is so wet, there's so much moisture, so much humidity. How come is it burning? Or people think it's not real and whatnot. But what happens is once people start the deforestation process, let's say they're clearing land for grazing cattle, or they're clearing land, they're burning the forest to grow soy or some other type of monoculture. What happens is the area of the forest that's next to the devastated area starts getting affected and starts drying out, almost like a desertification process. So that area in the border of the deforested areas becomes much more prone to fires and to burning, essentially. So it's a human-induced problem, basically. If humans were not burning it would be a lot more difficult for it to burn, of course. But this is a human-created issue. So to clarify, because a lot of people call Amazon, the lungs of the world. But what I learned, that's something that I also thought was correct. But one interesting fact is that yes, the Amazon produces a lot of oxygen, but that oxygen actually ends up being used by most of the plants and animals that live in the Amazon. So it's actually, the more correct term is to call the Amazon the air conditioning of the world, because it captures so much CO2. So it's more, like the air conditioning of the world rather than the lungs of the world.
Well, that's exactly it, because deforestation is kind of a two-prong approach when it comes to carbon, because the carbons store, or not necessarily the trees, but the soil stores a lot of the carbon. And by removing the forests and ruining the soil quality, you're no longer able to capture and store, but you're also releasing back into the atmosphere. So it's kind of that two-prong dire effect of deforestation, as well as what you've mentioned, desertification. It impacts on water quality. We've learnt in other parts of the world it affects the reefs. There's dead zones in the oceans, and the list goes on and on and on, as well as climate change affecting personal health as well, the effects of those fires. Now, that's something that a lot of, I think, was in the news. A lot of the local, people in Brazil and perhaps other neighboring countries were having quite a lot of ill health effects because of the intense smoke caused by those fires.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, the smoke travels, so, through the air currents. So whenever there are massive fires in the Amazon region, those small particles of smoke end up traveling to other areas, other, large urban metropolitan areas around the country. And there are several studies that have been done about that prove that, when those fires happen, there is a recorded decrease in the air quality in several parts of the country. And they see spikes in respiratory issues, in people and children and elderly people especially. So it's a problem, for sure.
Now, we've spoken about the cause of, you've mentioned that the two main causes of this deforestation is due to more livestock farming, so cattle, or growing of grain, specifically soy in most parts. Now, you have put out a brilliant booklet full of information, lots of graphs, and that we've actually put a link on our own website as well. And I certainly encourage our listeners to go and look at this report, because it just puts so much mind-blowing statistics on there. But two key things. Brazil is the world's, or has the world's second largest cattle herd, but it's the world's top exporter of beef, and it's also the top exporter of soy. Now, that soy export in part, and I won't know the figures here, but we know in part is due to China's demand, because the world's looking at China and China's saying, great, we're establishing this green belt where the government's going to fund green infrastructure projects, improve biodiversity conservation, put more trees, restore grasslands, improve water quality, because for years now they've been suffering from landslips and flooding and all that because of the devastation of their deforestation. So they're trying to improve their own state of health, but their soy demand is increasing. So I believe a lot of that has now gone on to Brazil to export back to China. So there's a lot of the world putting a lot of expectations on Brazil to provide meat and provide soy. So almost effectively Brazil's taking other people's problems.
Right. Yeah. I mean, China definitely plays a big role, but it's not just China, Europe as well and America, all big importers. And Brazil, yeah, they've always been, big in cattle and big in soy production. And it's something that's kind of, meat eating is very ingrained in Brazilians' culture. The Brazilian barbecue, the churrasco, it's part of their kind of culture. When you go and meet someone on a weekend, you go to somebody's house, oftentimes it's a churrasco, it's the Brazilian barbecue. There's always lots of meat. So it's a little bit more complicated, to raise that awareness there, because it's such a meat-centric culture, and it's very, very hard to break that barrier. But at the same time, Brazilians, they're also very environmentally aware, and there's also a lot of people and organizations there that are educating people and not only the general public, but doing great work in schools and teaching people at the corporate level in different companies. So there's a big movement in Brazil as well, spreading this information and educating people about the impact that their food choices have on the environment, more specifically on the Amazon.
And a lot of people, they're starting to move away from beef because they realize that it is a bit of an environmental problem. But it's not just the beef, is it? A lot of that soy that's grown in the Amazon ends up in Europe for chicken feed. So it's a far-reaching kind of issue.
Yeah, right. When you say soy, a lot of people immediately think tofu. And, the soy that's grown in the Amazon, it's not going for tofu. It's basically becoming feed for animals, like you said, chicken or different types of animals all around the world. So that soy is not for human consumption. The soy, that's usually GMO as well. So, the soy, the tofu, most tofu available out there today, most of it is organic, and you wouldn't, or at least non-GMO. So that soy that's being produced in the Amazon region, that's not going to make vegan products or tofu.
Just on the soy, one thing which is in that booklet that I just want to mention is one of the statistics you provide is that Brazil's the world's top exporter of soy, providing 56% of the global exports, and that equates to 34 million hectares of soy is grown or is grown in Brazil, which is the equivalent land size of Germany. So if our listeners want to look up a map and look up the size of Germany, that is how much land in Brazil is being used to cultivate soy. Now, Michal, you mentioned that the majority of it is GMO. That goes on to the next topic of water quality. How do we fill that gap? Well, with GMO, soy in particular, you're using a lot of fertilizers, and nitrate-rich fertilizers, the runoff, that then enters the whether it's the aquifers in the ground or straight into the rivers, but then that's also affecting, there's a flow-on effect, excuse the pun, water quality, then fish life and biodiversity in the water, and that'll impact, you mentioned earlier a lot of the indigenous populations that live in the Amazon River. All of a sudden that river's no longer, it sustains their life, and now that's impacting them. So are we seeing that as well, that something we don't really hear about, but is the Amazon River itself suffering from this deforestation?
I don't have statistics on the Amazon River, but the Amazon region in general is definitely suffering in those areas where you have a lot of cattle ranching and or just pastures for grazing or growing monocultures. So that has a tremendous impact on not only on the soil but also on the water beds, on the rivers, and it produces also water scarcity because they're draining so much of that water or polluting that water and creating desertification and erosion and changing the local climate, the microclimate. So it has extensive consequences and ramifications. And like you said, also the pollution of the rivers and the water beds, and that ends up costing taxpayers a lot of money because they need to make improvements to the water treating stations oftentimes, or building new ones because the water quality it's so poor. So it's a profound effect for sure on the water, and it also affects the water cycles because we often think of water just as like the water on the soil, on the rivers, but there's also the flying rivers which live in our atmosphere, in the clouds, and that moisture, when you affect the water that's in the clouds, you're affecting sometimes rain cycles that are very, very far away because there are these flying rivers basically that go all around Brazil and follow a certain flow. And when you disturb the water content in those rivers, then you end up affecting water cycles in different regions in Brazil. So we sometimes see droughts in parts of the country that are not experiencing deforestation, that don't have rainforest, but they are experiencing extensive droughts because of the effect on those flying rivers.
This is an absolutely devastating issue, and it's a global issue, not just locally to Brazil. A lot of the drivers are coming from other countries, as yourself and Ben have mentioned. So why don't we know about this more? Like, what's the drivers here? Is it a political landscape? Is it industry? What's happening?
Yeah, so it's many things together. I mean, for once, I think most people just don't care. The media doesn't help. They don't propagate that information to the extent that is necessary. The meat and the meat industry, especially in Brazil, it's extremely powerful. They have tremendous lobby in the government. There's a lot of politicians in Brazil, very powerful politicians that are farmers, that are cattle ranchers, including the president. So it's very, very difficult to get that message across from a political point of view. Also, the media is in bed with the meat industry. There's a lot of stations. The owners of certain TV stations are also cattle ranchers. So those are the people. Those are some of the richest people in Brazil. People involved in the meat industry. So it's difficult and oftentimes dangerous to mess with them because they're just so powerful and so influent in that country.
So if you were actually in Brazil yourself now, living there, documenting, well, you've documented, but releasing a documentary like this, you'd be putting your life at risk effectively.
Yeah, well, you never know. I mean, I'm sure it wouldn't be received very well by certain people, but I don't live there, so I'm not really worried. I mean, they can try to come for me here in Phoenix, Arizona, but I don't recommend it. We have a lot of guns here in Arizona, so way. But if I was living there, I would definitely, be afraid because you don't want to mess with those people, and especially activists that live in the regions, in the Amazon regions. They, people get killed all the time there. Especially people that are fighting, they're activists in the trenches. Are the ones that suffer the most. The people from the NGOs, and things like that, they're not really that much at risk, but the activists that are on the ground on those regions where things are happening, those are the people that are really at risk. So I'm not really that worried about myself. I feel more for the people fighting the trenches. But there's always a risk. You never know. It's a very powerful industry.
So there's a real, I guess, crossroads here, because you've got, on the one hand, you've got culture that drives demand for meat, internally in Brazil and, of course, globally. You've got a lot of locals in Brazil that understand what's, the impact of what they're eating and the devastation it's causing. And I guess you can split them into two, because some will do something about it and some, okay, they're aware, but are they actually going to change their way? And then there's the rest of us that don't live in Brazil. So we're on the outside. We see what's on the news. We see these horrific images of the Amazon burning. We'll eventually get to see your documentary. We can be outraged. We can be, infuriated with what's going on. But how do you think can change actually happen? I mean, to this day, right now as we're speaking, there's ongoing deforestation happening in the Amazon. And at the rate that they're going, it's I don't want to say it's irreversible, but it's getting to a point where it's so critical. So how can we actually take action? How can we actually contribute to making a difference? Some organizations, they're good at raising awareness, but do they actually do anything about it? If it's very politically charged, if it's protected by industry, wealth, how do you get through that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a multi-pronged approach. It's something that has to, happen on a legislative level, in government. It's something that, also has to happen on a corporate level with companies becoming more aware and becoming more conscious of what they're buying, where they're buying it from, and what effect the things that they're buying has on different ecosystems around the world. And it also has to come from, individual awareness. And I think that's the main driver. And unfortunately, the main driver for people, it's not the environment. I can tell you that the films that I released about, weight loss and health have been much more successful than, films about the environment. People just don't care about the environment as much as they care about losing weight or about their health. So I think that is the most powerful approach. And, that's what I like, veganism and the plant-based lifestyle so much, because I think, we address all of these things at once. With one simple lifestyle change, we're not only helping ourselves, our health, we are, tackling weight loss, we're tackling, also the environmental aspect, and also the animal rights, animal welfare aspect. So it's a beautiful thing. And I think that, education, people hopefully, continuing making films about this and writing books and blogs and podcasts like you guys are doing a phenomenal job. I think that's how we continue raising awareness and getting the word out there. And I think the movement, it's growing, it's growing quite a bit, but it's going to be a slow process. It's going to take many years for us to really, have like a critical mass change on the food systems around the world. But it's happening, it's happening. I can see, from when I started, a plant-based lifestyle like 8 years ago or 9 years ago now. And, with the way things are now, people are a lot more receptive about this. There's a lot more information out there. There's a lot more plant-based products, and it's a lot more accepted and sort of mainstream than it used to be. So it's exciting. It's exciting to see this growth, but we need to keep, promoting it and pushing and promoting the information, educating people and empowering people with this knowledge.
What's next for you?
Yeah, so I have a few projects that I'm working on at the same time right now. I have one documentary about longevity and life extension that also has a plant-based hook in it. It's not entirely about plant-based, but there's definitely a plant-based angle in it. And I'm also working on a couple other films. One that's related to plant-based protein and Also, another film that's kind of not really related to plant-based lifestyle. It's more about mindfulness and anxiety, and yeah, it's a little bit of a different topic. But yeah, right now I'm working on three films at the same time. So
You know how to stay busy, that's for sure.
and it's been a little more challenging now with this whole pandemic thing, and I'm not recording interviews as quickly as I used to, but we're moving forward and making things happen just at a little bit slower pace right now.
Well, Michal, we've been so lucky to get you on. So we really, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much for making this interview happen. It's two already hugely impactful documentaries, diet fiction, food choices, but Takeout is so critical. We really look forward to seeing that being released globally for the rest of us. If you're in the US, and we do have quite a lot of listeners from there, look it up. Amazon Prime. It's really worth the watch. But Michal, for you, thank you so much. Your passion, your insight. It's you 100% the right person to put this kind of documentary together. Thank you so much for sharing some of your thoughts and your energy with this. So thank you so much, and we look forward to having you back on the show maybe sometime in the future.
And for anyone that's unable to watch the documentary yet, go to the website and download that document. It's brilliant, and we really appreciate you putting that out into the world as well. Yeah. It's a great resource.
Oh, thank you. I have to give props to my producer, Nikki Taylor, and to my executive producer, Peter Eastwood. They kind of they spearheaded this project of this booklet. So we're trying to get this booklet also into different schools and organizations to spread the word about this issue. And if I may, I just wanted to mention one other project that I'm working on, because what I realize is that the documentary filmmaking can make a big impact on people. It's a good way to get the message out there. And I also, at the same time, I very often have filmmakers reaching out to me that are starting to work on a project or that want to start work on a project. And I noticed a pattern of people making very common mistakes when it comes to filmmaking and planning and marketing and distribution. Some mistakes that I made in the past. And so I decided to put together this online course for filmmakers to help them succeed. So it's not a technical course. I'm not teaching people about cameras and lenses and things like that, but it's more geared towards teaching independent filmmakers about the business of filmmaking. So, if there's any activists out there that are interested in learning more about how to, get the word out about their cause that they're supporting, then they can check out filmwarriorsecrets.com, and I have a free webinar there that provides a lot of value, has a lot of great information, and also have a booklet that I share there for free. And for those that want to continue learning, there's a an offer at the end, but the webinar has a lot of great information, especially for those that are starting out or those that are thinking about start working on a documentary. So just wanted to put it.
We'll put all of your important links in the show notes for everyone to be able to click away on.
100%. Now, to finish off, to our listeners, yes, we always go on about that. We want to have information relevant to specifically Australia and New Zealand. The Amazon impacts the rest of the world. It's the planet's air conditioning system, as Michal has put it. But the effects are the same as what's been happening in Queensland and other parts of Australia. The effects are the same as what's happening in New Zealand. So what we've learned here, you can certainly take elements of that and apply closer to home. And I want to once again make that appeal. The Native Forest Restoration Trust, they do amazing work in preserving little pockets of land and and even making small purchases in other parts to reinstate native forests. So please go onto our website, look at that under the Take Action tab, and make a little donation and help this wonderful organisation here in New Zealand. And we will soon do other projects similar like that in Australia. And it's not just native forests, it's wetlands, it's grasslands, and so on. It's all the same as a rainforest. So again, Michal, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, guys. And thank you so much for all the work that you're doing. And good luck. And I really appreciate everything. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Lentil Intervention podcast. If you found this interesting, make sure you subscribe and share it with your friends.